My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. This is the only channel dedicated to UFC picks and DraftKings lineups run by professional fighters and MMA insiders. Every week, I join Nick Newell, professional fighter, professional model, and ESPN Top 10 guest, along with Dan Kramer, UFC fighter, Bellator fighter, Ultimate Fighter alumni, and Jacob Lyons, a skinny kid from Indiana. And we break down every single fight, the betting odds, the DraftKings picks, and we set you up for success. Tonight, we're breaking down Fight Night Rozenstruik versus Gane. First up at UFC Fight Night Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Dustin Jacoby versus Maxim Grishin. This should be a pretty decent fight. I actually do think these odds are pretty straightforward, but Jacob, let me go to you. What are your thoughts here in what is essentially striker versus grappler-ish?
Yeah, first of all, you have to point out Jacoby, what a fantastic name that is. I mean, he got it almost all the way right. Added a Y for flair, but, Jacoby, what a great name. When I looked at Jacoby on tape, nothing stands out to me. He's not a great grappler, and he's got a kickboxing record, I think, of 10-8. And if you're an $8,500 fighter in DraftKings, I feel like you need to have something special to your name. And then you look at Grishin, and he's got all the experience in the world for this fight. And $7,700, it seems like a steal to me. He fought Ankalaev, who's on this card, and a big favorite on this card. And that was actually Ankalaev's longest fight of his career. Went to the fourth round. He ended up losing, but he fought him tough, man. He seems like a more refined fighter to me. Jacoby seems not quite as technical. He's definitely game to brawl. But in this fight, I think I'm taking Grishin to win. Neither one of them are going to be in my lineup. But I think Grishin can win this fight.
All right, so you're going with the underdog here. You're noting the experience. I mean, he has over 40 fights, which is a ton of experience. There's a bunch of vets in this. Dan, I'm going to throw it to you. Jacob's not touching it for his DraftKings lineup. He's taking the underdog to win. What are your thoughts here?
Jacob, I mean, we're starting off on the wrong foot here. I got to disagree with you. I think, first of all, Jacoby had a long layoff, like 2015, 2019. But since he's come back, he's looked really good. He's 3-0 in his last 3 fights over the past couple of years. He's only 32 years old, so he's much younger. His kickboxing looked really good his last fight. I guess he won a glory title. You said his record wasn't that good, but he was good enough in one night to beat, I think, 3 guys and win a title in glory. So he also used to fight at heavyweight, so he's not a small light heavyweight. I believe he's now training at Factory X. I think he looks really, really good his last few fights. His leg kicks, he dropped the guy with a leg kick in one of his more recent fights. So I think he's going to be the better overall striker. Grishin's got a lot of experience. He's looked really, really good over the years. But in his most recent fights, he fought at heavyweight, smaller size heavyweight, obviously. But the main thing I saw to him is he's just really a low volume striker. He looks for counters, very patient, almost too patient at times in some fights. And he let fights where I thought, like, if he turned it up, he might have been able to win, just get away from him by kind of not doing much, looking to counter and just kind of getting outpointed, held against the cage. So, I think Jacoby is going to be the younger, better striker, a little bit more athletic. He's looked better lately. So I'm taking him. I'm putting him in my DraftKings lineup at $8,500. I think worst case scenario, it's going to be a striking match. And I think Jacoby's going to be the more aggressive of the two.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with all of that. He is in my DraftKings lineup. This is an interesting card for lineups because there's a lot of heavy favorites that are very expensive, then some legit underdogs that are somewhat affordable. My biggest note here is that Dustin Jacoby's leg kicks are fantastic. High volume leg kicks, a ton of leg kicks. And essentially, if Maxim Grishin doesn't get the takedown, he's not going to win this fight. And I think those leg kicks are going to keep him away. He's only have to land a few to slow down those takedowns and really get him questioning. So, Nick, you siding with me and Dan, or are you going the underdog in this fight?
I'm going with the underdog in this fight. I think Grishin has a lot of experience. he's fought a lot of good guys. A little note, I followed Dustin Jacoby for a while. So he fought in the UFC before, and he wasn't very successful. He lost a lot. And then he switched to kickboxing, and they kind of brought him in as the MMA guy to lose to glory guys. And it really started off that way. And he started off really weak, but then he started winning all these fights, and he did win that kickboxing Grand Prix. And he has a 10-8 record, but it's deceiving because he lost a lot early and won a lot late. I mean, if you look at the guys he's fighting, also, they're like the best of the best in kickboxing. So to beat those guys, it really says a lot. So he's improved tenfold since the last time he was in there. He's a tough fight, and I understand why people would kind of believe in him, but I have some picks that I want to throw in. I think Grishin will win. I think his grappling will make the difference in this fight. And I'm putting him in my lineup because I think that he could win with his ground game, and he's just super cheap. And it just makes it easy for me to get in my other picks that I have.
All right. So you're picking him to win. You think he genuinely wins this fight?
I think he could lose, right? He could get outstruck. I think that Jacoby is the better striker. I think that Grishin is good enough to neutralize and get the takedown and win with his ground game.
All right. Well, this will be an interesting one. I think it'll be a fun fight. It's essentially grappler versus striker. And we're 2-2 here. So this will be an interesting one. The cost difference is tremendous. So this may make or break your lineup. And if you're not confident in this pick, I'd avoid it. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Vince Cachero versus Ronnie Lawrence. This is another close fight. We have a UFC debut versus a one fight in the UFC. So this will be an interesting one. I don't know if the jitters are a factor here or not, but Nick, what are your thoughts here? And do you think the UFC jitters are going to be a factor for Ronnie Lawrence in his UFC debut?
No, I mean, he fought at the Contender Series, so he's been in there. He's done that. And, he's got a tough fight versus Cachero, but I think that he should win. I mean, if you look at it, Cachero has the UFC fight before. It was a loss to Jamal Evmers. He jumped in short notice. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights, and I think he got in because he was a short notice replacement. But if you look back at his record, he's beaten some pretty solid guys in the past. But I think overall, Ronnie Lawrence is just a better fighter. But I don't really know enough about Ronnie Lawrence. He hasn't really fought the high-level guys. I'd say that, especially fighting Casey Kenny, Cachero has the more experienced opponents, the better opponents. But I'm not touching this fight because there's too many unknowns, too many variables.
So you're not going to put him in your lineup, and I agree. They're not in my lineup. I was messing with Ronnie Lawrence for a minute, but I agree. I think he'll win. I think he has no problem shooting a ton of takedowns, and I think that'll be the difference. And you're right. It's not technically, the days of 100% UFC debut are almost behind us with the Contender Series, but I'm not confident enough in it. We talked earlier, Nick, if you have $100 to throw on this fight, it sounds like you're going to throw it at Ronnie Lawrence at minus 160.
I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. I'm in that same boat. I think Ronnie wins the fight. I don't have him in my lineup because I'm not that positive. At $8,600, you got to be pretty sure that something's going to happen there. And I will put, if I'm betting $100 on this fight, I would bet 100 on Ronnie Lawrence. I just don't think plus 140 is enough upside for who I think will lose this fight. But Jacob, what are your thoughts on this? Who would you bet on if you have to bet, and who do you think wins?
Ooh, this was close to my pick of the week. We're not there yet, but this was close to my lock of the week because what do I tell you all the time? If there's an underdog who's Hawaiian, you always choose that guy. So I'm going to Cachero, and he's in my lineup. That UFC debut, he took on 2 days' notice and fought a weight class up against Emmers. And we'll talk about Emmers another time. I got beef with Emmers, but he took that fight on 2 days' notice up in weight class and took him to a decision. And Emmers is pretty good. I mean, pretty good. So, Cachero, I saw he was Hawaiian. I saw he was an underdog. He was going to be in my lineup. Then I started watching Ronnie Lawrence, and I got a little nervous because he is a fantastic fighter. But him being a UFC debut, Cachero just went through that. I watched an interview where he talked about wanting redemption after that decision loss. So Cachero, not quite my lock of the week. real close. Always go with Hawaiians on the underdogs. So I'm taking Cachero in my lineup. Give me the plus 140 with my $100. I'm making money.
So, Dan, are you also going to racially profile for your pick, or are you going to base yours on actual technical fighting ability?
I'm not gonna lie, Jacob had some good points there. I think I saw the same thing that both of you guys saw. Ronnie Lawrence looks really good. I mean, he had 12 takedowns in his last fight where he was a huge underdog. So obviously a good wrestler, good body locks. He landed some double legs. His pressure on top was really impressive. He scrambled really well. He made sure he really maintained that top control. But Vince Cachero, it looks well-rounded too. He's very tough. He was getting bombed on last fight by Emmers, but he hung tight, very active. So I think this is going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be a high-paced fight. I'm probably not going to touch it for DraftKings. I think the value play would be Cachero on this one. I just don't like the fact that there's a chance he could get out wrestled for 15 minutes, and that equals not a lot of points. So I'm not touching this for DraftKings. If I had to throw $100 on it, I'm probably going with the plus 140 because I think it's closer. I think this is more of a plus 110 minus 115 fight.
Gotcha. So you'd throw your $100 at it because you like those odds. You think it's
Yes.
closer than the odds. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be another interesting one. This card is full of very, much closer fights than the odds appear. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane. We have an absolute banger at light heavyweight with William Knight versus Alonzo Menifield. Two giant men who are ready to throw. Nick, I'm going to go to you first. You are personal friends with William Knight. You know him in real life. Your fighters train with him. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, so, I'll send my big guys over to help them in Connecticut. We got to stick together and we got to help each other out. And William Knight's a homegrown boy, born and raised in Connecticut, trains out of Connecticut, trains at Thornton MMA. And he's really close with his coach. I think that's important when you fight. I think a good bond. I had a really good bond with my coaches, and it made a big difference in your confidence. When you're in the corner and your coach is talking to you and you truly believe everything they say, it makes a big difference when you fight. And William has this undying passion and love for his team. I'm not saying Menifield doesn't. I don't know him personally. I've known William for a while, since he was an amateur. I actually, before he ever fought, I commentated a grappling match he did. He's a little new to the game. He's a lot greener than Menifield. If you look on paper, you'll say, okay, Menifield's a more technical boxer. He keeps his hands up. He's got good head movement. Things like this. William Knight does things not as well as Menifield, but he is an absolute dog and an absolute savage, and he's a winner. He finds ways to win. Things about him, he looks very muscular. He will never get tired. I will bet if the lines, any line in the world, that he doesn't get tired in a fight. The man is a cardio machine, and it's an anomaly because of how he's built. He never gets tired, and he never gives up. I see him every single fight he's in, except for his last fight, his UFC debut. He controlled it start to finish against an undefeated prospect in Kamer. And he won that fight start to finish and dominated the entire fight. He never gets tired. Now you look at Menifield, who's a better fighter on paper, but he does get tired. He does gas out. Devin Clark really wore him out with his wrestling. And again, on paper, William Knight, not as good of a wrestler as Devin Clark, but if he wants to be on top, he's going to get on top. He'll find a way to get on top. When he fought, I think Jameel Jones, All-American wrestler, William Knight took him down, ground and pounded him out, made him tap. So it's, I think William Knight wins this fight. I think he gets his ass whooped maybe in the beginning of the fight and rallies. So he might lose the first round. He might be losing all the way up until he wins, but William Knight always finds a way to win. And I think that he'll do it again here. I'm trying to figure out a way to put him in my lineup with other more solid locks. I'm just trying to think about how many points he's going to score. I think he's going to win. If I had $100, I'd throw it on him. No doubt in my mind. I just am on the fence about how many points he's going to score. So I might throw him in.
Yeah, he's definitely expensive. $8,200 is a lot of money. Especially, you don't see too often in DraftKings where both people are this expensive. So it's a true pick 'em according to the odds makers in DraftKings. I love your analysis. Obviously, you know him well. You've seen him train. You train fighters who train with him. So, your insight is invaluable here. I agree.
I've seen every fight he's had. I think I've seen every fight he's ever had.
Well, and my thoughts here are, I agree. I think Alonzo Menifield is trouble early, but at the end of the day, I think William Knight has better cardio. You've confirmed that. He definitely has better wrestling and grappling, and those are the two difference makers to me. I think he can weather that first round storm, and then that grappling and that wrestling is just more work and harder to deal with for Alonzo. And I see William Knight winning this either by a late stoppage or winning a decision, because I do think he weathers that storm. $500, we got to go with -110 in either direction. And I would put it on William Knight as well. I think cardio is honestly the second most important thing in a fight behind your actual abilities. So Dan, pro fighter, very long time. What are your thoughts on the cardio aspect here? Do you think it's that big of a differentiator in a fight like this?
I love talking about cardio. No, I mean, I do. It's honestly my only concern in the fight. I mean, I'm picking Menifield in this one. He's lost 2 in a row, but the 2 guys he lost to are freaking good, and they had a lot of experience. And he got put in that position because he went on a run. He was knocking other good guys out in the first round. And all of a sudden he gets thrown in there with Devin Clark, who I know is on paper not like an elite level, but that guy's athletic, very good wrestling. He trains at Jackson Wink. It's a tough fight for anybody, especially for a guy like Menifield, who's still, fairly new in the game, with 11 fights. And then he fought OSP, another guy who's been around, beating a lot of tough guys. So his last 2 fights he lost. He did get tired, but they were against really, really good guys, and he had to be grappling against Devin Clark a lot in that fight. So I think he's probably working to improve that. I'm hoping he is. But before that, he literally beat Paul Craig. He had really good takedown defense. His takedown defense actually looked really good in a couple fights. Just later in the fight, he just gets tired. He's got so much freaking muscle on him that it's impossible not to. So that is a concern. But in watching William Knight, first of all, he's from Connecticut, so I kind of have to root for him. But the dude is jacked. He's explosive, strong. He was through some hard leg kicks. But he stands a little square. His hands are low. He's a little flat-footed. His chin straight up in the air. And that is not a good recipe against a guy who throws heat that early on in the fight like Menifield. So I wouldn't be surprised if Knight weathered the storm and out-cardioed him, but I'm banking on Menifield having improved his cardio based on the last 2 performances he had. I think he's the better striker, and I think in the first round, if Knight's chin's up in the air, Menifield's going to tag it and put him away.
Are you confident enough to draft him at $8,000, or no, it's too close of a pick 'em?
I'm putting him on my lineup.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. So, Jacob, on to you. I know you have a lot of thoughts about any men that are in this great a shape. So why don't you break down quickly who you think is going to win?
You alluded to it, Angelo. Look at these guys right here. I'm never going to I know I look good, but I'm never going to the gym again because I know I'll never come close to looking like these guys. It took me 2 hours to even put this graphic together because I kept having to walk away from my computer. It was getting too hot. William Knight is an absolute cannonball. This guy's a cannonball. I watched him. He was in a bad position on his back, literally just lifted the other guy off him and took position. Said, I think I'll take position now. Just an animal. Menifield, an animal. I'm not touching this fight because I want to enjoy this fight, sit back and not care who wins or loses because it's going to be an absolute war. I think William Knight is going to win. If I had $100, I'd put it on him, but I'd like to give $50 to both of them, I think.
Well, more
best analysis of all time. That was great.
At negative 110, both of them, you will surely lose money giving $50 each. It's actually guaranteed.
No, I want to give it to both of them.
He just wanted to give it to them as people.
To them
hey, you guys look so good. Here's $50 each.
I'm picturing Jacob sitting on a couch and William Knight and Menifield standing behind him. Don't post that. Don't post that.
The Stark.
Yeah, so if we can get a 10-minute break after this, I'd be appreciative.
Quite the stark contrast between Nick Newell's insightful firsthand knowledge and Jacob Lyne's sinful thoughts and ways with this fight. But either way, this is going to be a ton of fun to watch. We're kind of split down the middle, as are the odds makers and everybody else. Personally, I'm going cardio over power, but this will be a fun one to watch. So let's see what happens. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane. We have the veteran Alexis Davis versus Sabina Mazo. We've seen a lot of these veteran versus new-ish up-and-comers recently. This is no different than the other ones. So, Dan, I'm going to go to you first. Do you think the tried-and-true vet will be crafty enough to sneak out a win against the young up-and-comer in Mazo?
I'm not 100% sure. I think she's very live in this. I think she's a live dog. She hasn't fought since 2019, so that is a little concerning. But her 3 fights prior to that, she went to a decision against 3 really tough opponents. And from a DraftKings standpoint, she scored between 35 and 50 in 2 of the fights. So she put up points. She was active in the fights, even in a loss. So at $7,300, she's very appealing in DraftKings to get that sort of output, even in a loss. Mazo, I watched some of her fights. You know, she's tall and long. She strikes at a distance, good kicks. She doesn't look entirely like a finished product technical-wise. But, you know, her last fight, she fought Justine Kish. And I thought she was losing that fight up until the 3rd round. She landed a head kick and ended up getting the finish. So she's been on a run. I don't think she's worth $8,900. I think Davis is live in this. I don't have her in my lineup right now, but I'm in between her and one other person as a value pick for the low cost. So I'm taking her for the value in DraftKings potentially. And if I had to bet $100, I'll take her at the plus 170.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I've gone back and forth with both of them in my lineup. I think it's tricky because, in my opinion, before I hand it over to you, Nick, I think Alexis Davis is a vet, and we've talked about veterans before, where she's smart enough to control this fight. I think Sabina Mazo needs either to control the distance or to be in the pocket, right? I don't think she can fight anywhere else. It's either in the pocket, and she's so long, she's going to throw up those big knees, you know, work her clinch, or she needs to be on the outside using her length. If Alexis Davis is somewhere in between at the end of a kick and inside in the pocket, I think she can control the striking. But I think she's also, you know, she's grapple heavy. She's physically very strong, and I think she can push Mazo up against the cage and just control the fight that way. So this is very tricky for me to pick. I have experimented with both of them in my lineup. Right now, I'm looking at my lineup to make sure neither one of them are in there right now because $8,900 should be a guaranteed win. $7,300 is a ton of value, but I think if she does win, it's just crafty vet holding her against the cage. So if I have to pick to win, I actually think I'm going to go Alexis Davis for the win. And I agree with you on the bet. If I'm going to throw $100 at it, even if I think Sabina's going to win, I can almost double my money on Alexis Davis. So, Nick, I'll go to you. I don't know what your thoughts are on this fight, but you know, let us know what you're going to do.
I mean, you look at all the fights that Davis has had since she came back. Vivian Araújo, absolute beast. Jennifer Maia just fought for the title, absolute beast. Kuchanian fought for the title, is like one of the top ranked, and she went to a decision with all of them. She's a live dog in this fight. Wins over Liz Carmouche. You know, Sarah Kaufman, she beat Jessica I. Jessica I think, is like top 3 at 125. So, I mean, she's tough. She's a live dog. Mazo's I think, I could be wrong in this, but I believe that Alexis Davis had a baby and she took some time off. And since she came back, she's been 2-4. But again, the people she lost to, Sarah McMahon, all these people, are very tough fighters, and it's hard to measure because she's not winning these fights, but she's also fighting really hard opponents. Mazo has won fights, but they've been close and they've been not against the same level of competition. This one's just really hard for me to bet on or touch with my lineup, especially when Mazo's one loss was to Morose, who's a grappler. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to put it in my lineup. If I had to put $100, I would put it on Davis, but I think Mazo's going to win.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I think we all think this is super close. And I think most of us agree that Sabina Mazo is probably the more technical striker. But Alexis Davis, you cannot rule out the grappling, the strength, or the veteran savvy. So Jacob, are you going to round this out? All four of us throwing money on Davis. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I like mental aspects of fighting and fighters. I like to try to go for intangibles. I did learn that Alexis Davis is studying to be an EMT. So that's, great for her, but that tells me that she knows that there's not, it's good for her to have a career afterwards, and, doesn't seem like she's going to be a champion. So that's good. But that means doesn't seem like you're all into me. But you guys nailed it as well with Mazo. She's good, but she's not, at $8,900. I need a killer. I need someone that's going to go in there and finish a fight. I think she's definitely going to win the fight. Yeah, I think she's more technical. She can outpoint her. It's going to be a decision. I think it's going to be boring. Probably going to be one of those 50, 60-point wins for Mazo. So for $8,900, that just doesn't cut it for me. So I think she wins the fight. If I had $100 to put on it, I think I would still take the negative 200 because I think she is that much of a better fighter. But, neither one of them are going to be in my lineup.
Yeah, another interesting fight. This honestly could be really exciting or incredibly boring if Alexis Davis gets her way. So we'll see what happens, but doesn't look like either one of these fighters are going to be in our lineup. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Ramazan Kurmagomedov, not Nurmagomedov, versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. This is another fun one. We don't have DraftKings money yet because this is sort of a last-minute replacement. Ramazan is taking this on short notice, and he's the favorite. So this is an interesting matchup. It's very hard for me to go against either Cowboy in any of their fights. But, Nick, I'm going to throw it to you right out of the gate. What are your thoughts here? Do you think short notice works well for him, or do you think Alex Oliveira does what he does?
Well, Alex Oliveira is weird because sometimes he shows up and sometimes he doesn't. And he looks beautiful. He beats someone like Max Griffin. Peter Sabata's been hot. He beat Peter Sabata. He has wins over Carlos Condit, Ryan LaFair, Tim Means, Will Brooks. Like, you go through, he's fought all these really tough guys. Ramazan hasn't fought the same level of competition. If you look, he's got I think a split decision win on the Contender Series versus Jordan Williams. I think that was upper weight class. I could be wrong. Yeah, I was at middleweight, and he's fought guys with okay records his last couple, and before that he beat some guys with some pretty good records. But it's like someone that's fought the best, like really good guys, and is inconsistent versus a young guy that hasn't really been tested and is undefeated. I'd have to see the odds on this. Before I can decide whether or not to put it in my lineup. But if I had $100, I would put it on Oliveira.
Yeah, I think, and that's fair. Yeah, I don't know. My lineup right now obviously doesn't have them in it. I would have to see what Oliveira costs. I am not going to put Ramazan in my lineup regardless of his cost. It would really come down to, is Oliveira in the 7-something range? If so, I'll scoop him right up. I agree. He's very inconsistent and he hasn't looked great lately. He actually missed weight in his last fight. He hasn't looked great, honestly.
Well,
but
can I say something? Let me add one more. I'm gonna, if I could pick, I would pick Kurmagomedov because I saw that Oliveira has like 14 kids. I think he legitimately has like 9 or 10 kids. And I have 2 children, and that is hard as hell to focus. I could never imagine having 10 children.
Yeah, well,
he has 10 kids with like probably, I think, 10 different women too. That's like
oh boy, baby, he's going out with his 6-shooter.
10 kids and 10 wives.
There we go. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Actually, he's the Cromartie of MMA. So I just think he hasn't looked great lately. He missed weight in his last fight. But with that being said, I'm picking him to win. And really it's because he has those flashes of brilliance. And a flash is either a full fight or even just a few minutes inside of a fight. And, Ramazan's taking this on short notice. And this is just an immediate giant step up in competition, right? Giant leap forward in competition overnight on a few days' notice. I just think it's too much. This is a full training camp for Oliveira. He's an actual vet with a ton of abilities, and he was ready to go. I just think it's too much, too early for Ramazan. So I'm picking Oliveira to win. I am throwing my $100 at him at plus 130. And depending on the DraftKings cost, I may have him in my lineup as well. Jacob, you're shaking your head. I'm not going to give you this yet. I'm going to go to Dan first, and then we'll go to you. So, Dan, what are your thoughts on this? You going vet or newcomer seizing the opportunity?
I mean, I think Nick nailed it when he said it really just depends what Oliveira shows up. I mean, the guy could be one of the best in the world one day, and then 2 fights later he misses weight and shows up and doesn't look like himself. So if I could get a peek on his training camp or call one of his 10 different girlfriends and find out what he's been doing, I would feel much more confident in picking him. I think he's the better fighter. If he shows up in shape and prepared, I think he will win this fight. And I think Kurmagomedov is going to be very good one day. He's an up-and-coming star. You can tell they have him they're counting him as a prospect. I think he's training with Almeida and Frankie Edgar now. So the combination of Oliveira potentially being in shape and ready to go and how good he is, plus Ramazan taking it on short notice, I'm picking Oliveira. Not very confident, though, until I see what sort of shape he's in. So my $100 would be on him. I may include him in my lineup, depending what the DraftKings numbers come out at. But I'm definitely going to search the interwebs to find out if he's been training somehow. Because if I find something that shows that he's in shape, I'm definitely putting some money on him.
Yeah, it's always tricky with some of these guys that have all the ability in the world but just aren't consistent. So Jacob, you were shaking vigorously, so I'm guessing you're going Ramazan. But why don't you go ahead and break it down?
I mean, I was going to try and give you credit, Angelo, because I think you nailed it on this fight as far as the short notice fight. I wish this guy had a full camp Ramazan, because that's the only thing that worries me. And it shouldn't be a huge deal, with those Dagestani Russians. And he's not a Nurmagomedov, but he is a Magomedov. And he's got the same style of wrestling. I saw him do the same thing. Khabib puts him against the fence, wraps up his legs. That short notice is just the only thing that really worries me with this fight. You guys mentioned as well, his Contender Series victory was a split decision win that everyone thinks he lost. Dana even was complaining about it, said he would have signed Jordan Williams, who beat him. He said, I wish I could sign Jordan Williams because the refs got it wrong, but I can't sign somebody after a loss. But that's a different story. Ramazan, I think you nailed it again, Angelo, with the level up in competition against Alex. But I still think he's going to find a way to win this fight. I think he's just going to get him on the ground, control him, and I would put my $100, even my $100 on the 145. I'm going to check his cost. If his cost is, that 8,100, I could see a spot in the lineup for him because he is a wrestler. But that short notice just really kind of worries me, the level up in competition. So I pick him to win Ramazan, but neither one of them in my lineup right now, depending on.
One thing I'll say about the short notice, I think I've said on a couple of the other podcasts we did, is this guy, he knows he's a UFC prospect. He's training at a camp with a bunch of UFC fighters. He's got to know that he's on a short list for a phone call. So you have to imagine he's in at least decent shape. I mean, he could potentially be in fight ready shape right now with the.
Yeah, I don't think to me it's not really the in shape thing, because all those Russians it seems like they never get tired anyway. To me, it's just I wish he had a little bit more time to prepare for what Alex. Yeah, for just a little bit, at least
and
a little
bit.
Oliveira's
a hell of a first fight in the UFC, right?
when you're in practice, you go with all different random people all the time, and you have to adapt to their style. So when you train, you get used to that. I don't think it's a big deal. I actually think if you're in shape and you take a fight on short notice, is a benefit because your body's not as run down. Because I started thinking about fights, and I've had times where I just trained too crazy and I went overboard, and even people telling me to slow it down, I'm like, I don't know. And then I have days where I'm in pretty good shape and I'm well rested, and I go out there and I just style on everyone because I feel great. I'm confident. I'm in good shape. So depending on if he's in training, if he's in good shape, I don't think the short notice thing is really a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky for me. I'm closer to Jacob on this, where I don't think it's about physically in shape. I don't even think it's about time to prepare for a specific opponent, because I agree with you, Nick. Those days are almost gone unless you're fighting an incredibly one-dimensional fighter. I think it's more just the mental like preparedness of, I'm going to fight who is a top 15 guy on the planet and has been for a long time, just like that. So that's where I think the short notice is a problem. I don't think he'll get tired. I don't think, especially somebody as well-rounded as Oliveira, there was nothing he was going to do in camp anyway for this fight. Oliveira can do all of it. So I think it's more, he's taking it on short notice, and this is just a giant leap forward. And Oliveira is a name. He's been around for a while. He's fought some of the best. He's beaten some of the best. He's lost to some of them. I think that may be too much too soon, but we'll see what happens. The two pro fighters both say it's not really that big of a deal, especially nowadays. So we'll see. It's an interesting one. These odds are probably accurate, and that's mostly because of what Oliveira's looked like recently. He hasn't looked great recently, but we'll see what happens. He's a live dog for sure, but you never know who's going to show up. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Alexander Hernandez versus Thiago Moises in what is essentially a wrestler versus jiu-jitsu guy, and this will probably come down to the striking. So, Nick, I'm going to go to you first. What are your thoughts here? Do you think it's that simple, that it's wrestler versus grappler, and it's really the striking that makes the difference, or is there something else going on?
I don't think wrestling versus grappler is really the only difference I'd say in this fight. I mean, both are pretty good on the ground and have pretty good wrestling. I'd say that Hernandez wrestling is better, and both can strike. I mean, if you look at Moises' last fight, he beat Bobby Green. It was like almost entirely on the feet, I believe. Bobby Green kind of gave that fight away by showboating too much, and Moises was basically like, screw it. I came here to fight, not to showboat, and move forward and earn that, like punch the clock and earn the win that way. He's been the underdog before. He heel hooked Michael Johnson. He beat Kurt Hollabaugh, who I think is a fantastic fighter. All around, he's former LFA champ, very, very good. But then you look at someone like Hernandez, who has a couple of losses. I think the loss to Cowboy, I'll chalk up to inexperience. He took too much too soon. He opened up his mouth. He started talking, and he wanted the vet. He got the vet, and he got beat up. But he was coming off a win out where he knocked out Beneil Dariush. That's insane. Beneil Dariush. I think that one was a little bit, he caught Dariush by surprise, and I don't know if it would happen if they fought again, but it happened. Another fight where he beat someone that's pretty tough. He beat Olivier Aubin-Messier. I hope I get that right. Who's a very good jiu-jitsu guy, a very good wrestler, and Hernandez grinded him out. I think Hernandez definitely has the wrestling advantage. Moises is all heart. I'll give him the heart advantage, and they're both well-rounded, but Hernandez is just a little quicker off the line, I think, and I would pick him to win this fight, even though I'll be rooting for Moises. I like him personally as a person. He's a good fighter. He's entertaining. He's an all-around good guy. But if I had to pick a favorite, I would pick Hernandez, and I would put him in my lineup.
And what about your $100? You're betting 100. Do you take that plus 160, or do you still going with the favorite here?
I'll go with the favorite. I'd go with Hernandez.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think, so I started saying it's wrestler versus grappler. And I think essentially that's my breakdown. Alexander Hernandez has the better wrestling. Thiago Moises has the better jiu-jitsu, very dangerous jiu-jitsu. And I think it's going to come down to the striking. I think the striking will be the differentiator in this fight. and it's tricky. It's very tricky. Thiago Moises beat Michael Johnson and Bobby Green. We've broken both of those dudes down in other fight videos in the past. They're both sort of always right there, but never right there. But Thiago Moises beat them both on his feet, mind you. And Alexander Hernandez has solid wrestling, has no problem shooting for takedowns. And like you said, he knocked out Dariush, where Thiago Moises lost to Dariush. It's a tough fight. It's much closer than these odds. I actually went with Thiago Moises on this. I think at $7,500, I think he's great for a DraftKings lineup. Because I see this going one of two ways. I think this is one of those, Hernandez is the better wrestler, but maybe worried about the jiu-jitsu, so they end up striking the whole time type fights. Or Hernandez says, screw it, I'm just going to take him down. I don't care. I'm not worried about it. And then I think Thiago Moises can submit him. So I'm going with Thiago Moises in this fight. I'm drafting him at $7,500, and I'll throw $100 at him at plus 160. I can, get back 150% of my money. I'm good with that. So, Jacob, I'll go with you. I rolled my math there. What are your thoughts on this matchup, and is either one in your lineup?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the lock of the week. 3-0 in our last 3 weeks. Last week, the other guy didn't even show up. So if there's a prop bet out there for a guy not to show up, you put that money on Alexander Hernandez, because that dude is such a tool. He talked so much crap to Cowboy, got humbled. I watched an interview this week where he was talking about, I just want the money. I'm here for the money. He said, I want to ride the money train. I want those fights. I need to make some money. You're here for the wrong reasons, man. He's very, very talented. But when I watch Thiago, man, he's a killer. I think Nick mentioned it in his breakdown where he was there with Bobby Green and said, you know what? I'm just going to punch the clock. I want to fight. That's what I see in Thiago Moises. He's also a very good grappler. You guys alluded to it's kind of a wrestler versus jiu-jitsu guy, but from what I saw, Moises is a great grappler. I saw him some good scrambles. He shot some great takedowns. I wouldn't be surprised if he initiates and says, I'm not scared to grapple. He gets the positioning on Alex Hernandez, throws him off guard. This is the lock of the week. Thiago Moises, 3-0, about to be 4-0 the last month. Run this money train. Let's go. And I'm putting my $100 on him, and he's in my lineup because he's my lock of the week.
All right. Well,
you're in luck, Angelo. You're in luck.
Lock of the week. So, Dan, are you going to take a withdrawal from your children's college fund and throw it on the lock of the week? Or are you going the other direction here? What are you doing?
I love it, Jacob. I love it. Listen, I think this is gonna be a tough fight. Hernandez is one of those guys. I agree exactly what you said, Nick. He started off his career on fire. His UFC career. He knocked out Dariush, beat Olivier Aubin-Mercier, like two really tough guys right out of the gates. And he wanted those big fights, and he got them very quickly. And he got taught a lesson by Cerrone, but then he came back and beat Trinaldo. The Dober fight, he got caught in the second round. And then his last fight, he looked phenomenal. He was throwing bombs, knocked that dude out in the first round. So he's very good. He's probably getting better. But, man, Moises is really, really good too. Moises has fought some of the best in the division. He's beaten them. He's found ways to win in fights where he's in trouble, like the Michael Johnson fight. I think he was getting a little bit picked apart in that first round. So he's got ways to win the fight everywhere. So I'm taking Moises. I'm rooting for him. I'm putting my $100 on him. I don't think I'm going to have him in my lineup at this point, just because I'm playing around with some dollars and some other picks. But, yeah, I'm rooting for him.
That Trinaldo fight is definitely a thing that throws me off, because that guy Trinaldo is beat the brakes off Paul Felder.
Right. That's crazy.
He's beating a lot of really, really good guys, and Hernandez beat him. So that definitely is a motivating factor for my decision.
Yeah, it should be fun. We'll see what happens. And both these guys are game. And I think this is I don't want to say make or break, because either one of them can lose and still go on to have a great career. But I think this fight sort of dictates who gets a nice leap forward in their career. And I think it's almost set up for Alexander to say, okay, let's see if you're as ready as we thought you were when you fought Cowboy a few years ago.
He won't even show up, guys. He won't even show up.
So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a ton of fun. So I'm looking forward to this one. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres versus Kevin Croom. I open every single one of these videos with, this is the only show dedicated to UFC fight picks and DraftKings lineups run by professional fighters and MMA insiders. This week, I have reached out to Matt Bessette. Matt Bessette is a fighter. He's been in the UFC. He's been in Bellator. He's been everywhere and has had success everywhere. He fought Kevin Croom. He beat Kevin Croom. And Nick and I reached out to him and said, hey, Matt, can you do us a favor? Break down this fight. Give us a little bit of insight and let us know who you think will win. So let's look at Matt's pick, and then we'll move on to ours right after.
What's up, everyone? Matt Bessette here. Just checking in. I was given the task by my friends Angelo Bodetti and Nick Newell to predict the Alex Caceres versus Kevin Croom fight coming up here for the UFC. It's not an easy one. On paper, it looks like Alex would be the favorite. If you're looking at record alone, Alex doesn't have the most impressive record, but he's been in the UFC for a long time. He's fought some lower rung guys, he's the middle tier guys, and he's fought the highest of the high guys. And Kron Gracie, one of the best jiu-jitsu players of all time, and Uriah Faber, always a high-level fighter at 35 and 45 in the WC and UFC. So Croom's going to get tested. Croom's going to get tested as soon as the fight starts, and I think that he's up for that. He's put a lot of time in with his striking and James Krause. He's changed his style up completely, and I think that's going to be his key to victory. If he stays in the pocket and doesn't move his feet and he's stuck in the mud, I believe that Alex is going to make him pay for that. That being said, I think that the veteran in Kevin, the amount of time that he's put in, and the fact that this is not his first fight in the UFC anymore, he's not going to have any kind of jitters. He's going to go out there and do his thing. And I think it's going to be a very, very close fight. That being said, Alex has fought some of the best, and that I don't believe jitters are going to play a role in his game. So it just depends on which Kevin Croom shows up, I believe. This new Kevin Croom is one to really pay attention to. I'm excited to see what he has added to his game and what has evolved. I am going to predict with my heart. I'm going to say that Croom is going to win by first round TKO. If that doesn't happen, the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Alex. But if I'm putting a few bucks down, I gotta give it to Kevin Croom. Good luck, bud.
All right, so Matt Bessette going with Kevin Croom. Check out Matt Bessette on social media at @Mangler_MMA. Firsthand knowledge there. So he was in there with Croom. He stopped Croom, but Matt has a ton of experience. He's been around the block, but he felt that firsthand, and he feels that if Kevin Croom can move around, keep his feet moving, and sort of dictate that pace, not stay at the end of Bruce Leroy's length, he can win this fight and potentially stop Bruce Leroy. So, Nick, I'm going to pass it off to you. You're also a good personal friend of Matt Bessette's. What'd you think of that breakdown? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you see this fight going?
I think that Matt has some good personal insight. Matt gets very friendly with the people he fights. He's an all-around nice guy, very caring person, like peace, love, martial arts type guy. When he fought Kevin Croom, I remember I was there. Matt beat the brakes off him, and Kevin was on a little doing kind of well up until that point. Beat some good people, but Matt really really beat him pretty good, and he's since switched some things up. I think he started training with James Krause, who's done an amazing job coaching, one of my favorite coaches to watch and follow, and someone that I actually ask business advice from sometimes because he does so well. But he beat Roosevelt Roberts. Roosevelt Roberts was on a hot streak, beat a lot of really good people, looked great. Kind of got caught in a tricky armbar by Jim Miller, but was a big favorite, and Croom threw that overhand, dropped him, and choked him out in like 30 seconds. He made it look easy, and he was going up a weight class. The hard-hitting hillbilly was his nickname. I don't know if he changed her yet, But I'm like, man, I really like this guy, the hard-hitting hillbilly, Kevin Kroom. And he is hard-hitting. He's got power. He's got a lot more power than Caceres has. Caceres is more a volume puncher. Doesn't really put his hips behind his punches. Doesn't really put anything on him. Just kind of wears you down, kind of Diaz style. I've trained with Caceres before, and not extensively, just like one round. And he's really tricky. He's not the best wrestler, but I don't think Kroom is either. But Caceres can move around really well. He's quick on his feet. He bounces around, and he can scramble with the best of them. He's been in there with the best fighters in the world. He's won some, he's lost some. But if I had a bet on this fight, I would bet Caceres. I think he's more pinpoint. I think if it gets into a scramble or they engage in a grappling, he could exchange. He could get the submission. Kroom's been submitted before. He's also very good on the ground, but Caceres is very crafty. I'm going to go with Caceres, and I'm putting him in my lineup. Give me $100. I'm putting it on Caceres all day.
Yeah, it's definitely. I actually think this is going to be the most fun fight of the entire night. I think Kroom is just ready, willing, and able to fight. And he'll fight anybody, anywhere, anytime, and he's just gonna, fight. And I think that's a ton of fun. I've never seen Caceres. Jacob spelled this wrong. What a shock that is, right? Caceres is in a similar boat. He's always down the fight. He's pretty entertaining in most fights. It's just tricky. He's another one of those guys. I honestly think he's one of the most underperforming guys in the last 15 years or so. He's got, solid ability. He's been around for a while now. He's an actual vet at this point, and he's basically 500. And that's not even because of his technical abilities. He's pretty solid everywhere. He just doesn't show up half the time. And I don't know why. He's had an interesting career. Lately, he's looked pretty good. I personally am actually going to go with Kevin Kroom in this fight. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to sort of mental preparedness. And I just think Kevin is the more solid fighter, if you will. I think, Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres, I think he's the better fighter. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. I just think Kevin Kroom shows up, knows what he's supposed to do, and tries to do that every single time, where Caceres, he doesn't, right? Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. He's very inconsistent for somebody who's been around as long as he has. So I'm basically putting it on sort of mental fortitude here, and I just think Kevin Kroom has it a little more together to get this done. So I'll go to you, Jacob. What are your thoughts here? You misspelled his last name, but are you going with Alex Caceres or Kevin Kroom in this fight?
You want to get him, Jacob, or you want me to? Angelo, didn't he give it to you 7 hours ahead of time to proofread?
I don't have enough time to read every word.
I saw the text messages. I was looking back and forth.
Unbelievable. Go ahead, Jacob. Why don't you give us your breakdown and your apology for the spelling error?
I don't even care about you coming after me for the spelling stuff, but I'm getting sick and tired of you guys stealing my nickname swag. Nick's mentioning he's the hard-hitting hillbilly. That's my thing. I go for guys for nicknames, and that's the only reason I went for Kevin Kroom in this fight. Alex Caceres is a very good fighter. To me, he has a lot of fun in the octagon. I think he has too much fun in the octagon. He does some wild stuff sometimes. I think it's going to get in some trouble here. If you're paying $8,800 for a 17 and 12 fighter, more power to you. That's not me. $7,400, Kevin Kroom, I think is great value. He's not in my lineup, but if I had $100, I'm taking that 175, the hard-hitting hillbilly. I don't think you can go wrong with Kevin Kroom in this.
Yeah, and good point. Sorry, I guess I didn't make my I said I think Kevin wins. But yeah, neither one are in my lineup because I don't trust them to bet the house on them. But at plus 175, those are fantastic odds. You can almost double your money on what I think is a pick'em fight. I think this should be a pick'em. I don't think I think reflective.
Yeah, and I think he was I think he took his UFC debut on short notice, was a huge underdog, and finished it in the first round. So he's known to be he's very comfortable in the underdog role.
Yeah. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts? So we'll have 5 people.
First of all, I just want to know, if Matt Bissett knows him, can you ask him to talk to somebody to get him to change his UFC stock profile picture change? because that just
That's a
does
great
not
picture.
look like a hard hitting hillbilly. It looks like
That looked exactly like a hard-hitting hillbilly.
it looks like the guy who's like at the 8th grade dance without a date, kind of in the side of the picture, with trying
Oh,
to
this
fit in
is
with
what that
everyone
looks
else.
like.
Wow, that's a good point too, Jacob.
He looked like he's flexing too hard. Like Mazo's picture looked like she was like flexing way too hard. I wanted to say that, but he's just trying to look ripped. And
He's got a weird look in that picture. I don't know what it is. Every time I see that picture, it just throws me off. Anyways, back to fighting. I think Kevin Kroom is very live in this for $7,400. I think he's a great value. I love the fact that he's now training with James Krause and taking that very seriously. He looked obviously very confident and good in his last fight with a quick win against a very, very tough fighter. So he definitely has good subs, right? He got that choke in the first round. His wrestling looked decent. He had really good entry, but just didn't really finish that great. He had some good knees in the clinch. He was very busy. So I think he's probably improving at a fast rate, and I think he's very game. Caceres, same thing. I mean, he's very good, very skilled. He's fought everybody. Lately, he's looked better than usual, but to Angelo's point earlier, there's fights where he just kind of shows up and it's like a sparring session for him almost. So I think he's the more skilled fighter, but I think Kroom is very tough and will compete well in this fight. I think he's a live dog. I'm going to put him in my lineup for the $7,400. I think either way, even in a loss, he will get some points. So he's in my lineup. I'm definitely betting on him. $100 at plus 175 if I had $100 to bet. And yeah, Kevin Kroom, just get that picture changed and we'll be good.
Yeah, either way, this is going to be a ton of fun. I do anticipate an exciting fight. Both of these guys enjoy fighting, like to fight, and they should have a good time fighting each other. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder. This is another vet versus, kind of up-and-comer, but this is another Angela Hill inconsistent but very talented fight, similar to what we just broke down with Alex Caceres. She's very talented, very inconsistent. So, Nick, I'm going to go to you first on this one also. What are your thoughts here on this matchup? To me, these odds are wild, but let me see what you think.
Well, they already fought, and she won pretty convincingly, I thought, and she's since improved a lot. And if you look at Hill's record, she has all these losses, but they're all split decision, like close fights. I think I see 3 split decision losses, and even the fight with Jiang Yan was like really close. So that's like 4 fights that could have went either way. You switch that up, her record is 16 and 5, so it could be either way. She's having all these close fights. She's fighting the best people in the world. I thought, a lot of people thought she won that Gadella fight for sure, and Waterson was super close. I thought she won that fight. She's beating everyone else. She's finishing these fights. She rallies late. She's a high volume striker, and Yoder does well. I mean, I honestly thought she won that fight with Mackenzie Dern, who's a really, really tough fight. And she's won a few, lost a few, but she's not been as hot as Angela Hill lately in terms of momentum, even though she's winning. She's on a win streak right now. I'm going with Hill. I'm putting her in my lineup, and I'm throwing $100 at her.
So I think I agree. I think the odds are a little crazy. So I have Angela Hill in my lineup. I think Angela Hill wins. She's a bit inconsistent, which makes me a little nervous. But to your point, the Claudia Gadeja fight, a lot of people had her winning, but the big takeaway from that fight was she did a great job defending takedowns. And I think Yoder's only path to success here is if she gets takedowns and then can win sort of the grappling. I don't know if she'll be able to do that. I don't think she'll be able to do that. With that being said, I have Angela Hill in my lineup. I have her winning the fight, obviously. I don't know if I would throw $100 at -360 with somebody who's as inconsistent as she is. If I have $100 and I have to bet it on this fight, I think I'm going Yoder at +300. I just, as good as Angela Hill has been, earlier in her career, she was very inconsistent, and that just makes me nervous. She should win. She probably will win. I have her in my DraftKings lineup, so I'll be rooting for her to win, but I wouldn't put my $100 on her. I would put that on Yoder. So Dan, you're the gambler of the group. What are your thoughts on that? And what would you do with your money?
Well, it's not allowed per your rules, but what I would do with my money is not bet this fight because I don't like the odds. I agree. But if I had to, Angelo has a gun to my head to bet $100 with terrible odds both ways. I think Angela Hill is going to win this fight. So I'd put the money on her even at those terrible odds just because I don't think Yoder is going to win this fight. You guys all said a bunch of things that same things I'm seeing. She's lost a lot, but they're to all top level talent, ex-world champions or, people who fought for the title. So, and she's looked good in the fight. She was competitive. So Nick said a lot of split decisions. She's very athletic, good feints, active. Her takedown defense is really what sealed the deal for me. She, against Waterson, her takedown defense in the first round early on looked awesome. And she's aggressive off that takedown defense too. She throws knees, she makes you miss she makes you work for a takedown. If you don't get it, she's aggressive and punishes you. So I like her style. I like her aggression, and I think Yoder's going to have a tough time striking against her, and I don't think she's going to get the takedown she wants. So I think Angela Hill is going to win. I have her in my lineup right now. I don't love paying $9,200 for her, but she's in there right now. I may switch that out, but right now for $9,200, I have her in there. Wish she was a little cheaper.
Yeah, and actually, good point about the 9,200. She's in mine, but this is a crazy card, and I had a ton of money left over, so I was like, you know what? Let me take that chance, I guess. But $9,200 is a lot of money. But again, the money for DraftKings is based off of, is she going to win this fight? Yes or no? And obviously, the DraftKings people and the odds makers have said she's definitely going to win. Just how and what points she scores is the question mark. So, Jacob, I'll go to you. You're gonna
actually never mind. I realized I took her out. Good.
All right. Well,
I do think she's gonna win, but I don't want to spend $9,200 on her. So I got somebody else in there instead. We'll get to that.
Yeah, when we build our lineups, you'll walk through that. But Jacob, why don't you let us know your pick here and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, you just alluded to it. $9,200 is a lot, especially against Ashley Yoder, because she is tough, man. She is so tough, and she's not going to get finished. Angela Hill is not going to finish Ashley Yoder. So at $9,200, that's a tough pick. But you also alluded to it. Some of the other heavy favorites it's such a wishy-washy card with those heavy favorites that $9,200, I put her in my lineup because I think there's no way she loses this fight. And she's a very active fighter. She's going to come forward. She's going to throw punches. If it goes to the ground, she can reverse positions. So she is in my lineup. I wish I could have picked Ashley Yoder as my lock of the week. That way in case she did win, I could send her a DM, hey, Ashley, I'm the only one that believed in you, type of thing. No disrespect to Pollyanna. Pollyanna's still my girl. But Angela Hill is in my lineup. $9,200 is a little bit expensive, but I feel better about her winning more so than the other big favorites. So that $100, I'm with Dan. I wouldn't put $100 on this fight either way. And I think I would put on Yoder if I had to. Yoder, I would put it on you. My heart.
You're gonna DM Menifield after this fight too?
No, I'm sending Nick a text to show him.
Right,
both of those guys.
Okay.
William Knight, if you message him, he probably would look at it and answer back. I know him pretty well. This is
getting awkward very quick.
Well, either way.
Next fight.
We're all pretty confident that Angela Hill will win this fight. We're kind of split on if we would spend our money on her or not, but either way, this actually is another fun one, and we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have a rematch in Pedro Munoz versus Jimmie Rivera. Jimmie Rivera won this fight the first go around. Dan, unmute yourself. I'm going to you. Do you think Jimmie wins this rematch again, or how do you see this going?
Now, I think Pedro Munoz is very live as the underdog here. I think he's going to win this fight. I know, Rivera's beaten him previously. It was a split decision. Rivera's only recent losses are to Peter Yan, Aljo, Sterling, Marlon Moraes. He just beat Cody Stamen, which is really solid. But Pedro Munoz, on the other hand, has been fighting the best of the best too. He also lost 2 in a row, but to Frankie Edgar and Aljo Sterling. So these guys are both top-level talent. I think it's going to be a close fight, but I think Munoz has got an edge a little bit everywhere, and I think he's going to win the fight. So I'm putting him in my lineup, and I would bet $100 on him at the plus money, and what I think should be more of a pick'em.
Wow, so you're that was very confident of you. So Jacob,
I just like the pick. I like the odds. I like the value. I think it's going to be, Jimmie Rivera's striking has me a little worried, but I mean, Munoz is tough and he hits hard, and he just went 5 close rounds with Frankie Edgar. I mean, that says something. So.
Well, and the Frankie Edgar fight is a good one to look to because I based my pick off of that fight essentially, and the way I saw it, Frankie Edgar obviously beat Pedro Munoz in a close fight, but Frankie Edgar does what he does. He's got a ton of foot movement. He stayed outside. He moved around, pop, 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 move, pop, 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 move, and I think it's always tricky when you have a rematch. I think Jimmie Rivera wins this fight. He won the first fight. He's a solid wrestler. He's a solid boxer. And the Peter Yan fight, so Jimmie Rivera fought the current champion. He was beating him. And he got hit and he got dropped in first and the second round. But I thought he was beating Peter Yan. I thought he looked fantastic in that fight. So I actually think Jimmie Rivera wins this fight. He beat him the first time. I think he beats him the second time. But the Frankie Edgar one is interesting because Pedro looked decent in that fight. And Jimmie does not fight like Frankie Edgar. So that's not going to be a carbon copy. But it's definitely an interesting one. I'm going with Rivera on this. I would put my $100 on him, but I don't have either one in my lineup because I agree, Dan, this is much closer and it should be a pick'em, and a pick'em is not worth $8,300 to me. Nick, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the rematch, the result stays the same or does it flip?
Yeah, I think the last fight was really close. It was a split decision. So super close fight. I think that Pedro Munoz is a better inside fighter. I think he hits harder. I would say that his guillotine is maybe one of the best in the world. I've seen his fights. It's amazing. It's super, super tight. Rivera, what you get is someone that's a little bit cleaner of a boxer. Maybe not a better puncher, but a better boxer, a better technician. And he works really well behind his jab, especially looking at the Faber fight. If you look at the Munoz versus Edgar fight, a lot of people thought Munoz won. Obviously, he has a win over the former champ, Cody. And, if you look at Rivera, he had a great fight with the current champ, Yan, even though he got dropped, but he was still controlling and winning a lot of that fight. I'm going to go with Rivera, and I think that this fight will have like a high output. I feel like Munoz is going to move forward a lot and make Rivera work. Rivera is more of a patient fighter, and he'll take his time, and he doesn't care. I mean, if you look at his fight versus Dotson, he'll take his time, and he doesn't care about throwing a million things. But I think Munoz is going to make him. I think he's going to make him clinch. I think he's going to make him make it into a fight. And I think that Rivera is just a little bit cleaner technician. So I'm going to take him, and I'm going to put him in my lineup as well. And I will bet money on him.
Nice. Yeah. That's some interesting insight there, that you think he's not necessarily eager to come out and make the fight happen, but he'll definitely respond to Pedro doing that. And you'll think he'll get the better of those exchanges.
Yeah, Pedro just moves forward and he can cut off the cage like really, really well. So I think that Pedro's going to make it a dog fight. But I'm going to pick Rivera to win.
Nice. All right. So Jacob, what are your thoughts here? What direction do you see this rematch going?
Yeah, so I'm going to combine something that Angelo said and then something that Nick said. Angelo mentioned the Yan fight where Rivera was winning that fight. He got dropped at the end of the first and the end of the second. how he got dropped was Jan kind of pinned him against the cage, and he was there was nowhere to go. And, Nick mentioned Pedro can kind of press forward. I think he does that same thing. I think he presses forward, get Rivera where he doesn't want to be. There's 3-round fights. You never want to take both fighters, and I'm not taking both fighters. I think this is going to be the fight of the night. If the night Menifield fight is not the fight of the night, I think this is going to be an absolute war. And if there was ever a time to take both fighters in a 3-round fight, I think it's usually the smaller guys because there's less chance of a knockout. And I think these guys can be active enough that they could both score. The winner gets, 80, 90, and the loser gets 40 or 50. It's that active in a 3-round fight. So with that said, I think Pedro is going to win this fight. I would put $100 on him. Neither one of them I'm going to see me on the lineup just because I think it's one of those you either put them both in or you leave them both out because it's such a competitive fight. But I think it's going to be the fight of the night, and I would go with Munoz in this.
Yeah, I agree. If this was a fight night headliner, for sure, both of them go in there, and I don't even really think about it because they're light guys, they're active, and we'll see what happens. But either way, another fun fight and another very close fight. The odds are, I think, are accurate because he did win. Jimmie Rivera won the first time they fought, so these odds are almost a pick 'em. But another fun one. We'll see what happens. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have Montana De La Rosa versus Mayra Bueno Silva. So this is an interesting matchup. De La Rosa is huge for this weight class and a very wrestle-heavy fighter. And then Bueno Silva is a solid grappler with some solid striking, but much smaller. This is interesting. The odds have been bouncing around all week on this one. So, Jacob, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts on this fight? Do you have either one in your lineup? What do you think goes on here?
Neither one in my lineup, but if I was going to put one in, it would be De La Rosa because you mentioned it, the grappling. I think she just controls this fight from start to finish on the ground. She's bigger. Her grappling is incredible. I think Bueno Silva can rely on her jiu-jitsu a little too much, just end up on her back and just get control the entire fight. I would put $100 on that plus 120 easy. I think De La Rosa is at elevation now with all those tough guys and girls up there. So, that's an incredible camp to be in. And her grappling, I think, is just too much in this fight. So I think she wins the fight. Interesting DraftKings play with the grappling and all the takedowns. I think it's one of those that once she gets her on the ground, she just controls her though. So it's 5 points around, I think. So it's not worth it. Maybe for $7,800 it would be, but I think she definitely wins the fight.
Yeah, so you're going heavy on the underdog here. And to be clear, when I say grappling, I'm talking about jiu-jitsu essentially. So De La Rosa is the much better wrestler. Technically, Bueno Silva is the better jiu-jitsu practitioner, but your thoughts are De La Rosa will take her down and not get submitted and control those positions.
Correct.
Gotcha. So, Nick, I'll go to you on this. What are your thoughts here? Do you think it gets to the ground? And if so, do you think Bueno Silva can do something with it or she just gets controlled?
I just don't think that she has the wrestling to get it down. I think that De La Rosa, is the better wrestler and will get the takedown. But, De La Rosa's been submitted, but we're talking about Mackenzie Dern out here, who's maybe the best grappler in the world. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. It's like Alex Caceres getting tapped out by Chrome Gracie. Really, we're talking about high-level people that are good off their back. Now, that might be where she gets herself in a lot of trouble with Mayra Bueno Silva and her good jiu-jitsu as well. I think there will be a lot of neutralizing in this fight and not a high point fight. If I had a bet, I would go with De La Rosa, kind of getting the takedown, but not really doing much, pushing against the cage and roughing her up. I'm not touching it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think I personally think I think Bueno Silva wins this fight, and I think it really comes down to I think she has a better striking. I think she has more power, and her striking's a little cleaner. So that I see this going one of two ways. I either see Bueno Silva almost stopping Montana, or at least stopping those takedowns and just piecing her up with her striking and more powerful punches. Or I see Montana holding her against the cage and just sort of riding it out, maybe taking her down and controlling her. I don't see a super active fight here. and I don't intend on spending any money in DraftKings on this fight. If I had to pick a winner, which I'm going to pick, is Buena Silva, and I would put my $100 on her to win this fight at those odds. I think she can defend the takedowns, and I think her striking's good enough to win the fight. But De La Rosa's huge for this weight class, and that is sort of a tricky piece there. So Dan, what are your thoughts on the giant wrestler versus the boxer with some solid jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I mean this fight comes down to, and I wanted to find a way to justify putting Bueno Silva in my lineup. I think she's a really good striker. She's got that tall Thai stance, powerful right hand, right elbows, good front kicks, leg kicks, knees. She's got that traditional Thai stance, and she's aggressive with it. And I love watching that. She's really good. She fought Jillian Robertson in her UFC debut, looked great. She got taken down a couple times, but her takedown defense looked pretty competent early. She unfortunately did end up on her back, though, and that's where I see the biggest problem is, and Jacob said it earlier, she's very comfortable with staying on her back, and it's worked out for her a couple times. She's gotten some submissions, some arm bars, but I am just not a fan of when you get taken down, you stay on your back. I think you need to be scrambling to get up, especially with someone that has her level of striking. So that's my biggest concern with her, that she has yet to show any sense of urgency to get back to her feet in any of her fights when she gets taken down. And De La Rosa, we know what she's going to do. She's going to try to take her down relentlessly. She's big, she's strong. So if I had an ounce of information that Bueno Silva was working to stand up to her feet off of a takedown, I would pick her. But right now, based on what I'm seeing, I'm probably going to end up reluctantly avoiding this fight for DraftKings. For my bet, though, I would bet 100 on Bueno Silva. I think she's the overall better fighter, definitely better striker, and De La Rosa is just a better wrestler. So,
yeah,
not for DraftKings, but Bueno Silva would be my $100 bet.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup either way. Wrestler versus grappler with some striking in there. So we'll see what happens. It'll be an interesting matchup, and we'll see, sort of whose career goes in the right direction. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Gane, we have the co-main event in Nikita Krylov versus Magomed Ankalaev. And this is going to be a ton of fun. This is an awesome fight. This is an awesome matchup. I'm genuinely excited to watch this fight. Ankalaev is one of the best prospects we've seen in a very long time. And Nikita Krylov has had some absolute wars with some top guys on the planet. So I'm looking forward to this fight. These odds are crazy. But I am looking forward to this fight. I think Magomedov will get it done, but I'll get into my pick in a minute. Nick, why don't you go ahead and go first and let me know who you think wins this fight?
Mm-hmm. I mean, Ankalaev has looked amazing lately. He's an absolute machine. He has that loss to Paul Craig with like 1 second left where he was just killing him the entire fight and then got caught in a submission. But I feel like all the guys that he beat, that Krylov would beat too. If he fought those same people, he would look just as impressive and he would beat all these people. If you look at Krylov, we look at his record over here, you'll see back in the day, he knocked out Walt Harris in 25 seconds. That's insane. Walt Harris is amazing. Obviously, Walt is a way better fighter now than he was in 2014, so that was a while ago. But recently, he beat former Bellator champions. He's beaten a lot of good guys. He eventually lost to OSP. And then who are his losses lately? He loses a split decision to Glover, a split decision. So Glover's out here finishing Thiago Santos, finishing Anthony Smith, finishing all these guys, winning all these fights, working up, and winning a split decision against Krylov. That's the number one guy, a split decision versus the number one guy. And then Jan Blachowicz, he loses to Jan Blachowicz, who's the champ. So you lose to the champ and the number one contender, and one of them was a split decision, and you're 6,900. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like he would beat all these guys that Ankalaev is beaten too. And at his value, I'm putting him in my lineup, and he has more experience, and I'm also picking him to win.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's not a bad pick. I have Ankalaev in my lineup, but like I was very scared to spend that money. $9,300 is a ton of money. And like I said, these odds are nuts. These odds are so far apart. I think this is definitely not a pick 'em because Ankalaev has looked amazing. But this should be closer to minus 150, plus 150, something to that effect. You know, minus 350. That's a lot of money. That means you have to spend $350 to win 100. That's risky. So I do have Ankalaev in my lineup. I think he's the better fighter with his combat sambo background, and as good as he's looked lately, I think he's a better fighter. I think he wins this fight. But if I'm betting $100 on this fight, I would throw it at Krylov at plus 290. To spend $100 to maybe get, $30 back, that's not worth it to me. But Jacob, I'll go to you. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you think Krylov's a much more live underdog than these odds makers think?
Yeah, he's definitely not a slouch, man. $6,900 is very appetizing for someone of his skill level. But you look at Ankalaev too, and you mentioned it. What a prospect this guy is, and he's going to be in my lineup. I don't want to say reluctantly, but I just ran out of big. I mentioned it before in the other videos that some of these big favorites I'm not comfortable with, and I think that Ankalaev is just slightly better, pretty much everywhere. On Krylov, and definitely an incredible grappler. So he is going to be in my lineup. Another reason why I put him in my lineup is because I think he cost me 2 DraftKings before by beating Jan Cutelaba. I put Jan in my lineup twice against this guy, and he just demolishes him. So, Ankalaev, you're in my lineup now. If you turn on me, it's not good for you, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely it's interesting. This is the pick is interesting. $6,900 for somebody as good as Nikita is an interesting pick. So Dan, what are your thoughts here? Nikita, very good. Ankalaev, very good. And these odds and these prices very far apart.
Yeah, no, I think the price valuation of both of them is a little bit too far apart. But I do think Ankalaev is the better fighter. Krylov looked really good his last fight after losing to Glover in a very close fight. Like Nick said, he basically went to split decision with the number one contender, who, in my opinion, should be fighting for the title right now. I'm biased because he's a good friend, but at any rate, he looked good in that fight in the loss. And then he looked really good against Johnny Walker. He fought a smart fight, took him down early, had good control on top. And I think Walker was a heavy favorite going into that fight. So Krylov's definitely been getting better. He looked much improved his last fight. But I will say he did start to look tired in the third. Rightfully so, because they were bombing on each other at one point. But I think Ankalaev is just better everywhere. I think he's a better striker. He's got really good wrestling, sambo credentials. The dude is just legit. And I think, honestly, he could potentially be a future number one contender, world champion. He's basically undefeated. That one loss, like Nick said, was in the final seconds where he was dominating. So I think Ankalaev is going to win this fight. I think he could probably win it anywhere, to be honest. And 9,300 is a little more than I want to spend, but I'm putting him in my lineup.
I have a question for Dan, too. You said Ankalaev is legit. Would you say he is too legit to quit?
Definitely too legit to quit.
Thank you.
So you picked him, you drafted him. Are you spending money on him at minus 350 or no? At that point, you'll hedge your bet and you'll throw it at Krylov.
Yeah, I mean, with our fake $100 bet. Yeah. So this, for the record, this would be a non-bet, as much as that angers Angelo. But if I had to put my money one way or the other, I mean, I guess 100 at negative 350. What do you get? Like $20 at the end of it? Yeah, I guess I'd throw it on Krylov just for a Hail Mary to see if I could triple up my money, but I don't see him winning this fight. So I'd basically be giving my $100 away.
Yeah, this should actually be fun. The odds, we all agree the odds are way off. This is a much closer fight than both DraftKings and Vegas feels, but it's going to be a ton of fun to watch. And a bunch of us, I think actually we all have somebody from either one of these fights either one of these guys in our lineup. So this is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and we'll see what happens. So for our main event of the evening, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Ciryl Gane. There's no way I pronounced those names correctly.
Ciryl.
Ciryl. There's a Y and an L. I mean, the C is a S instead of a K. This is ridiculous.
So you just went to Ciryl?
Ciryl. Yeah, I'm very hungry. It's late. I'm not. I'm hungry. This is a banger, a literal banger. Two heavyweights that are absolutely going to throw bombs with sort of world level Muay Thai striking abilities. This is a crazy fight, and this will be a ton of fun. This is exactly what fight nights are built for, fights like this. So, Nick, I'll go to you. How do you see this going in this striker versus striker matchup?
Jacob's going to get mad at me, but I love Rozenstruik's nickname, Biggie Boy. Biggie Boy. I don't know why. I think it's just a fun nickname. I'm like, what a fun nickname, Biggie Boy. And, he's coming into this fight. If again, Jacob, if you go off physiques, then Ciryl is going to win all day. He's got the more impressive physique. But I mean, you look at Rozenstruik, and he is a monster. They both knocked out Junior Dos Santos. That's not a knock against JDS. That's actually a compliment to them. JDS beat Derek Lewis not too long ago, and these guys both knocked him out. So, it's tough. If you look in terms of prospect level, Gane has been amazing lately, knocking people out. I think he has a heel hook win. I know he has a heel hook win. And so it shows that he can grapple. Big Boy's going for leg locks. That's insane. And, the upside is great. And then you look at Rozenstruik, his one knockout, basically Francis Ngannou closed his eyes and ran forward like a maniac and caught him with one punch and put him out. That could really happen to anyone with Francis Ngannou. I don't think it's a big it's a big tell on his skill. And you look at the Overeem fight where he was getting dominated, but he didn't. I think Overeem has amazing ground and pound and actually very good submissions, and couldn't submit Rozenstruik. He got up and knocked him out. If I had to favor someone, I would, Rozenstruik has a better kickboxing record, but Gane, I would favor Gane, but I'm not confident enough that he can get it done. So I'm going to avoid this fight. I'll pick Gane to win just because I think that he can wrestle and kind of mix it up a little better than Rozenstruik, who will basically just strike. But I'm not touching it, even though it's a main event. It's 5 rounds. I mean, someone could get finished early, but I just don't know who it's going to be. But there we are.
And heavyweights are always tricky. So you always want to draft somebody in a main event when you can, because you have 5 rounds to work with instead of 3. But heavyweights are tricky because the odds of this going 5 rounds are very slim. And anytime you have 2 guys with this much power, there is no such thing as a guarantee. With that being said, I think Gane, I'm not even going to attempt the first name. I think Gane is the better striker. He does not have as much power as Rozenstruik does. He just doesn't. But I think he has the better movement, like his foot movement, his head movement. I think that's all better. And he definitely has the better grappling. We've seen him grapple. He knows how to grapple. He's willing to grapple. So if he does get into trouble, let's say in the first round, he can switch it up between rounds and come out and grapple and sort of dictate where the fight goes in the second. So I think Gane should win the fight because I think he's the better striker technically. He doesn't have as much power, but the better striker technically. He has the more well-rounded game. But I actually have Rozenstruik in my DraftKings lineup at $7,200 with that kind of power. And his only loss being basically a flash knockout to Ngannou. I couldn't pass that up. So he's in my lineup. I do think Gane wins the fight, but my DraftKings lineup and my $100 bet would go on Rozenstruik in this one. So Dan, what are your thoughts here? Are you going to split the same way I did, or you right straight line, have a winner and a lineup and a bet?
No, I think this is a tough one to call. I'm actually doing the same thing as Nick. This is probably the first time, I don't know, that I can remember that I don't have either of the main event fighters in my lineup. And just because I feel like it's a coin flip, and especially with heavyweights, anything can happen. But when I was watching tape on these guys, it's an interesting stylistic matchup, right? Because you've got, I believe it's pronounced Gane, but we can keep going with Gane. Gane, who's, a great kickboxer. They're both great kickboxers, but he moves like a lightweight. He switches stances. He's in and out. He's got great kicks to the legs and the body. Likes fighting from a distance, and he's so fast, then he explodes in range and lands big shots. So very athletic. He keeps his hands low, which most of the time at heavyweight that would worry me, but his reaction time is so good and his counters are so good that he's able to do that. Or at least he has been so far. He's fighting a guy, though, in Rozenstruik, who is a very powerful striker, a great counter striker. That step back counter left hook is probably his best shot. He's got good leg kicks, also has a long kickboxing career. He's very patient with calculated aggression. So it's very interesting stylistically. So I'm not sure how this fight's going to go. I could see Gane fighting a smart fight, being in and out and picking him apart. But I could also see Rozenstruik landing a big shot on one of those exchanges and putting them away. So not going to touch it for DraftKings. If I were going to bet, I would definitely take the plus 225 odds on Rozenstruik. I think this line is a little too wide. So think it's going to be a great fight. Rooting for Rozenstruik. Would put my money on him, but I don't have him in DraftKings right now.
Gotcha. So Jacob, what are your thoughts? Are you also not touching them in a main event? What's your move here?
Yeah, when I saw this matchup and I started looking into the fight, I knew immediately I was going to take whoever the underdog was in this fight. It's just so close. I was going to go with the underdog and just kind of hope and pray. So I put Rozenstruik in my lineup at $7,200, and then I started playing with my lineup. And I mentioned before, I've mentioned 100 times, I don't like the favorites in this. And then I started looking at their styles, man. You mentioned Rozenstruik is a kickboxer. Gane is a Muay Thai guy. These guys are very active when they fight. They're not the typical heavyweight sit, wait, one punch, sit. We saw it last week with Derek Lewis. They're both very powerful fighters, but they don't fight relying on their power. They're not just waiting for that one punch. So I think this can be an active fight. Rozenstruik went to a 5-round decision. Gane's gone to a 3-round decision. So I started looking at this fight, man. And I mentioned earlier that with the Pedro Munoz fight, that might be a fight that you double up the 3-rounder, where you don't normally do that. Normally you do not double up heavyweights, but I think if you were ever going to double up a heavyweight fight, it's a Muay Thai guy versus a kickboxer. I think they're both pointing, leg kick, punch, jab, keeping the distance. They can go cardio. They both went decisions before. So they both ended up in my lineup. I think Rozenstruik's going to win, but they both ended up in my lineup. I just didn't want my money anywhere else. I think it can go the distance, and they can both score points in the distance, in a distance fight.
That's not a bad pick, Jacob. I'll be honest. I thought about that too.
It's tough, man.
With tough. Heavyweights, you never know. But yeah, I would be more concerned about Rozenstruik landing the big power knockout and ending the fight early.
And I'll tell you why. Another reason why I did that was because this allows me to pick the 2 heavy favorites. We'll talk about it later, but I was comfortable enough in my underdog picks that I was comfortable losing in the main event. So I feel like my underdog picks are very, very good picks. I have my lock of the week, so that's guaranteed. So I feel like I'm going to be, 4-0 going into this fight, and it'll be my first loss. And if it's a flash loss with DraftKings, the way it levels out, nobody can pass me up. So if I win the fights come up to it and I have both fighters, I can't lose.
Yeah. The one thing too, Jacob, in your favor that's actually makes Rozenstruik a good pick is he's got a great chin. So to your point, over 5 rounds, they're both going to be kickboxing, right? They can both kickbox 5 rounds all day. They've been doing it their whole life. And he's got a good enough chin that, let's say he does lose a decision. For $7,200, you got 5 rounds to score points in what's going to be a kickboxing match that he could even potentially win. So not a bad pick, Jacob. I don't know about doubling up, but Rozenstruik, I'm with you.
Yeah, doubling up the main event when we have heavyweights sort of goes against conventional wisdom, but this is tricky. Either one of them could get stopped. It could go the distance. There's a lot of wild cards here, so we'll see what happens. Check out our full DraftKings breakdown video after this to see who ended up in whose lineup and what those lineups look like. Before you go, check out the description below. In there, we have links to our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and more importantly, to our DraftKings League. Check out the league, join the league, participate in the contests, and as we get going and as you start winning, we're going to start handing out gift cards and participating and doing things like that. So check those out. Every week, there are drops on every fight card. So make sure you check out this channel and our social media on Saturday before the fights start so that you have our most updated lineups and picks.